1 second, friends. What is on? Good morning and welcome to this virtual but very real community. I am the Reverend Aaron Stockwell, Senior Minister of this congregation, and today I feel like I'm kind of flying in a spaceship here, along with being in a live TV studio, but it is so good that you are here. Who we are as a faith community. We are Unitarian Universalists. We are a faith for all souls. It doesn't matter who you love, where you came from, how you move around in the world. It doesn't matter your race, your skin color, your age, or your ethnicity. What matters is that you are here, a part of this community, connected in new and wonderful ways. Our chancel decorations, which I'm not going to try to adjust this. Let's see. No, okay. I'm not even going to try to do that. That's good to know. Our chancel decorations, which you will see very shortly, are put together by Rupal Bhatt. This is what she had to say. Bread and Roses is the title of a poem that became an anthem for women marching for improved working conditions a century ago. Today, it's linked to recognize women's accomplishments and contributions in paid and unpaid work. Tomorrow, March 8th, is International Women's Day. Of course, the youth group here at the First Parish are having a food drive to benefit Hope Food Pantry. Feel free to swing by through the parking lot today, 12 to 2 p.m. I heard that they already have a phenomenal amount of food collected, but the need is greater than what we have. I hope that you will also join us for coffee hour later today after the service, where you can get connected and see everybody's faces. If this is your first time joining us, thank you for joining us. This marks a very strange anniversary. A year ago today was the last time that we held in-person worship here in this space. So, welcome. If you are not yet connected to our email newsletter, please feel free to click the link right below this video and you can get connected. Dear ones, love has held our congregation together since 1701. My goodness. Through the American Revolution, through the Civil War, through world wars and pandemics. That love is larger than any buildings, walls, or screens. So welcome to First Parish.
Enough.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, love and amazing grace, and our heart is in a holy place. When we share the silence of sacred space, and the quiet of our hearts stands within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, and our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
All right, I think that you can hear me a little bit. I am not sure what has gone on with the sound, so that is fun. Let me just try one thing. All right, hang in, folks. Hang in there. We're just...
Dean to play us in.
Yeah, Dean, if you want to play around for a little bit. Not sure what is happening. All right, you probably can't see me, but let's see how the sound is. Is the sound all right? How is the sound now? Let me know. Is that any better with less crackling? Any better with less crackling? Thanks, Jan. I so appreciate that. Great. It was the battery. It was indeed the battery. And I'm sorry. We are a 3-person crew doing all of this
show
right now. It is live. Our call to worship today is written by Maya Stein. It is a poem. Any comments down there?
Still a little crackle, but it's sounding a little better.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm wondering, Rebecca, if it's also your microphone over there. Yeah. All right. That's just how we're gonna do things. We will tilt the camera up a little bit more. We'll do it live here. That's good. Yeah, that looks great. Our call to worship comes from Maya Stein. When we get through this, I want us to set a table with all of the loaves of bread we practiced in our quiet houses. I want clutching fistfuls of the cilantro we coaxed from our city windowsills. I want the nascent musicians, the ones who learned old songs on their new ukuleles or warbled choruses on isolated balconies. I want to take the stage together. I want all the knitted, crocheted, stitched, and mended things pooled at our feet, warming our ankles. I want us to greet each other in unfamiliar languages, to tell the stories of those who have been lost. I want us to look in unison toward the world, millions of miles and light years away, to take in what is before us and beyond us. I want us to wake up to the magnitude of our fortune against the smallness of time. And then I want us to remember and keep on remembering. Our chalice is lit this morning. Our chalice is lit this morning as a flame of memory and of hope. I invite each one of you to kindle your own separate flames. Once they are lit, feel free to type into the chat, "The chalice is lit in my home," or "The chalice is lit in our home."
And now she messes up.
Good.
Some people still have crackles.
From all that dwell below the skies, let sons of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung, through every land, by every tongue.
Love is the doctrine of our church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve all life with compassion, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. This is our great covenant, one with another and with our God.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
So for the last several weeks, we've been talking about this experiment. Milk, food coloring, a little bit of dish soap. And we've been thinking about how it works. Awe and wonder, and then the scientific principles of what's happening. But so what? Why have I spent 3 weeks on this very time for all ages? Well, today we're going to be talking about stories. We're going to be talking about how we make sense of the world as humans. And so, when I think about this thing that brings me awe and wonder, and I try to understand it better, I make my own story in my head. I am like the dish soap, entering into every new environment and affecting change, searching for connection, and in the process, perhaps repelling others. It is a story that I tell myself when I think about this science experiment, when I think about the awe and wonder of who I am and how I interact with the world around me. What beautiful colors do I bring into my everyday existence and in my relationships with other people? Who am I naturally attracted to? Who do I surround in protective bubbles? Who do I perhaps push away? How do I bring awe and wonder into my daily relationships with the people that I love and the people whom I just don't know well enough to love yet? Hopefully, we are all the dish soap. Hopefully, we are all finding connection in every new environment that we put ourselves into, real, virtual, or otherwise.
To this tapestry of a community, we each bring our joys and our sorrows and our milestones, our happy and sad occasions. We know that joy shared is joy expanded, and sorrow shared can feel as though someone is lifting our burden. There will be prompts on the screen that will give better order to our sharing. Feel free to type those things that you are carrying into the chat box. In this virtual space, please remember that privacy cannot be guaranteed. So feel free to get in touch with the minister if there is something too tender to share.
Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Stay with me, stay with me, stay with me, oh my soul. Stay with me, stay with me, stay with me, oh my soul. Dance with me, dance with me, dance with me, oh my soul. Dance with me, dance with me, dance with me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul.
Rebecca, if you want to skip there's feedback about how the sound is, I would appreciate that. How is the sound? Is that any better? Can you hear me? Let us take a moment. People trying to figure out if the sound is working all right. If anybody wants to provide feedback on that, I would so appreciate. Quality good. All right. Maybe we solved it. I don't know. Dear ones, let us now sit in your own individual quiets. Take a moment to notice however quiet is for you. O Spirit of life and love, named and unnamed, but who calls each one of us by our true first name, which is beloved. I give thanks for this community, for your deep, deep patience through technical problems, through your resilience through the last year, for all of the joys that you have shared in the chat, for getting to go on walks, for getting to see friends, for first and second vaccines. I give thanks too for all of the scientists that made it possible, all of the nurses and medical professionals who are carrying an unimaginable load right now. I also move to all of the sorrows that we carry, for people living with illness, people living with not knowing, for people waiting for test results to come back. During this last year of physical distancing, we have lost 500,000 people, and who knows what else we have lost. Unmeasurable things that we have lost. May we take the moments that we need for prayer and reflection. May we too work to bend the arc of the universe towards justice, knowing that sometimes that can feel like it is the strongest tempered steel. But with enough of us pulling on it, we can bend it toward justice. We can end oppression. We can end poverty in all forms. Dear one, my wish for you this day is that you are gentle with yourself. We live in a world that seems like it demands perfection, rather. May we be reminded that our imperfections are beautiful. They are stunning. They are what make us human. And sometimes we need to move back into right relationship with those around us. Because we are breathing, we can still move back into right relationship. I say these words and do all things for love's sake. Amen. And now let us sit for just a few more moments in our own separate quiets so that we might rest or pray the prayers of our own hearts. Amen. So for today's reading, we're gonna do this a little bit differently, actually. I had been talking with Rebecca about the theme for this week's service, which is personal mythologies and sacred stories. And as we were talking, we started to talk about what our own stories, the personal mythologies, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but the pieces of literature that we were exposed to as children that have proven instrumental, or not necessarily instrumental, but very, what's the word?
I think it's critical. I think it's the things that revolutionized who we were.
Yeah.
Those galvanizing moments through fiction
Exactly.
in our own childhood.
Yeah, so you were telling me a little bit about a piece of literature that was really influential to you.
Yeah.
What was that?
Well, and it's interesting because the last time that we were live, somebody asked about what my favorite book was.
Right.
And I brought this one up. And it's the stories of Mary Poppins. And I have here with me the 3 original Mary Poppins books that had belonged to my grandmother and then to my mother. And as I was looking at them again last night, I opened up the first one, and it has, in my grandmother's handwriting, my mother's maiden name. So clearly my mother must have taken it to a library or to a story or a play group or something, and my grandmother had thought to write her name in it. And it's copyright 1934. So these books were my grandmother's, and then they became my mother's, and then they became mine. And my mother used to find times on a weekend afternoon, and she would say, let's read. And she'd make herself a cup of tea, and the stains on the front of the covers of these books are very likely me tipping over said cup of tea. And we would sit in the formal living room, not in the casual family room, but in the formal living room, so it was special. And she would make scones, and we would sit and drink tea and eat scones and read these books, which are very much of their time, 1934. And I find myself transported into my mother's lap when I read them. And they're complicated, right? There's social commentary as I read them as an adult. There's social commentary on England and the Western civilization of the time. But as a child, they were just magical places of escapism. And Mary Poppins was this incredibly complicated character. She demanded perfection. You were just talking about how our imperfections make us human. And she's practically perfect in every way, right? And so my mother's sense of who she was and who she wanted my sister and I to become are really foundational in these books, that you must be at one time very proper, but still able to create magic. And that's kind of an impossible standard to hold a small child to, that you should become practically perfect in every way. But I realize how much it's influenced who I am as a caregiver, who I am as a DRE. And how about you? What are those mythologies from your childhood?
So the mythologies from my childhood, I don't know what folks are saying down there.
Shall I slip down and find out?
Yeah.
Still crackling going on, coinciding perhaps with a cell phone or an iPad, getting an announcement or a text message, although it doesn't seem like that's the case.
Okay.
We apologize, folks.
Yeah, we are so sorry. I guess that is just something we will have to learn for next time. That is good to know. I guess the last time we did this, I was not preaching from my iPad, so
Fair enough, perhaps.
that would make
perhaps
sense.
It's that.
Yeah. The mythologies that I was paying attention to when I was a child were Star Wars. Mainly, not that one. Not the first trilogy. but the original trilogy, Star Wars, A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi.
Such good stories.
And especially Empire Strikes Back, because a lot of that is about the Jedi Master Yoda training Luke in how to be a Jedi.
Right.
And there's a lot of a Jedi does this, a Jedi does that. And aside from my involvement in the Boy Scouts of America, there was not a lot of formal character education that you might have otherwise gotten from growing up in a church or something like that. So this served as kind of the moral education, the teaching of how people should be in the world.
Or in a galaxy far, far away.
Yes, we're in a galaxy far, far away, a long time ago. And I'll talk more about this in the sermon, because that's what the sermon is about uncovering our own personal mythologies. But I'm wondering if you want to share, what were some of the the ill effects of having this as a central mythology in your own life?
It's so interesting, because yours is all about, character building and becoming a Jedi and the best that you could be,
right?
Which is what Mary Poppins is about too.
Yeah.
Right? It's about becoming the best that you can be. And both of these main characters, they falter, right? Luke stumbles, and he's not perfect, and even Yoda isn't perfect,
right,
in all of his wisdom.
Yeah.
And while Mary Poppins is infallible, those that she comes to take care of are very, very fallible. And she has to come back. I mean, there are 3 books, right? There are, in fact, 6 books.
Right.
And she has to come back over and over again to course correct the children of the Banks family. And so, I think as a child, I didn't really fully recognize that what P.L. Travers was trying to say was, you can't be perfect. You're always going to need someone in your life to help you course correct.
Yeah.
That's not what I understood of it at the time. It's what I get of it now.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was, it felt like more of a threat. That if you weren't good, that somebody was going to have to come and rescue you. And that was problematic. And so it was always a bit of a toss and a turn. Who was I? Was I the Banks children?
Right.
Or was I supposed to be Mary Poppins? My mother very much positioned herself as Mary Poppins. And then there was this sense that I would inherit that and become Mary Poppins for my own family. And in fact, when my mother passed away, both my sister and I looked at each other and said, are you practically perfect yet? Because somebody's got to take the mantle.
Right.
Because Grandma was before us, and then was Mom. And I don't feel particularly practically perfect. How about you? And so Eliza and I have decided that we should really retire the phrase. But that's taken a lot of growth and opportunity to.
Yeah. I think for me there's a lot in the Jedi training about don't feel feelings. And I think for young boys and young men who are already told don't feel your feelings, to have something reinforce that probably wasn't too great. It's taken a while to learn how to feel your feelings, how to not view the world in black and white as well, which I think is one of the things that is so seductive about the dark side and the light side in Star Wars, is how much it forces you into that binary thinking.
Sure.
Well,
and Mary Poppins would tell you to, stiff upper lip it already.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. So I think that is about all we've got time for. We got other stuff to do in the service. So now is the time in our service that we set aside for talking about generosity, for talking about the offering. The offering is a sacrament of our free religious faith. The morning offering will now be joyfully given and gratefully received as we switch cameras here. All right. Oh, that is very loud. All right, we have turned down the gain on mine. Thank you. Whoever suggested that, I think that was Bill. Thank you. All right. Where's that? Rebecca, if you want to be my spotter with that C, I apologize that we need to do a sound check, it seems like, every time. Especially then there's also about a 6-second delay, so it's pretty, it is not instant gratification when it comes to watching this. So Ben or Bill, if you want to chime in with how the sound is, I'd appreciate it. Let's see. All right. Well, we will begin, and I will look out of the corner of my eye to see if Rebecca is giving any feedback on how the sound is. We each carry a story or several stories within us. They could be stories that an adult read to you as you were growing up, like the stories of Mary Poppins for Rebecca. They could also be stories on TV shows or movies, like it was with me for the Star Wars movies. It could be stories that were told in organizations you were part of, whether in church or a synagogue or other youth development organizations. They could also be the stories that happened to family or to yourself. What are the stories that you heard over and over again, that you were steeped in, that gave you your flavor and instilled in you your values? Folks saying the sound is good? Good. Massimeno? Okay. I had a sort of dawn breaks over Marblehead moment in between Christmas and New Year's, an epiphany about a formation of my own personal values. Some of you know, and more of you will shortly know, I was not raised in any religious tradition. My mother was raised Catholic and my father in the United Church of Christ, and when they had children, answered the question on how they would raise myself and my sister with none of the above. And I know my mom and dad watch these services, so I need to say, Mom and Dad, it's fine. I'm grateful for that upbringing. I gained the insight that for me, in the midst of a 12-movie marathon of Star Wars, the sacred story or personal mythology I carried with me was the story of the Jedi from the Star Wars universe. Yes, for those playing along at home, 12 movies, or it might have even been 13. We watched everything that was feature length, including the very middling in quality Ewok movies and the much bootlegged and maligned holiday special. Lizzie and I went very deep. Now, I don't know how to summarize the entire Star Wars universe if you've never seen the movies. It's the story of individuals finding their place in a battle of good and evil, figuring out how to live their destiny. There is a student, a Jedi in training by the name of Luke, and he is being trained by a green alien species of which we only, in the movies, meet one or two creatures of, only known as Yoda. Watching Yoda train Luke, I watched and listened to what Jedis do, how they act, how they behave in the world. They viewed the world through the stark contrasts of good and evil. I learned that anger leads to hate, and hate leads to the dark side. It took years to unlearn some of that. Jedi aren't real after all. They were stoic, didn't show much emotion. And aside from my time in the Boy Scouts, there was not a lot of overt character education that I was receiving. Not a lot of talking about how people act and treat one another. Maybe there was, but that's at least what I remember. What are your origin stories? What are your sacred stories? I don't mean the stories of your birth, though for some of that can shape some of our character. I mean, what are the stories you tell about how you set off on a particular path? How you decided to do what you do or did for a living? When you when you fell in love and how? The story of falling out of love. The why of starting a company, your origin story of finding this congregation. The stories of why you have the values that you have. As I continued to explore this concept to see if I was the only one who had thought this way, I mentioned this to a few colleagues and they said they hadn't, at least as I had formulated it. The moment this concept clicked for me was a few summers ago in the hills of the Sangre de Cristo mountain range in New Mexico at the Boy Scouts Philmont Scout Ranch. I was attending my first leadership training in nearly a decade, having gone through and taught most of them before. I'll admit I was a little bit cynical, even if being there was my choice. I was looking at the training from a big picture viewpoint, not necessarily from a skills development perspective. I got tired of how much they were telling the story of the man who donated the land that Philmont sat on. I had worked out at the ranch 2 years immediately after graduating college, and in between years 1 and 2 in seminary, and I had told that story or that myth many times before. I mentioned at one point that I was sick of hearing it. And then I paused and recalled the interim ministry training I had attended that January. We had learned about how to use a community's sacred stories, whether from the Bible or a poem of their own, and how to use that to reflect back to them the story that they were creating, that they were writing. We use sacred stories, stories that everyone knows or can be told easily as a metaphor to teach about how the world should be or to simply illustrate a lesson. Suddenly, it made sense. We use stories to create meaning and deepen our own understandings of the world. We use them to make sense of the world. And again, these can be sacred stories from literature or the movies from our families, from our own personal experience. All of that, to me, is a sacred story. We have all consumed culture and had life happen to us. But for it to be a sacred story, it has to change our life somehow. Once returning from the wilderness or returning from that story, we have to live into it. We have to look at the world through the lens of that sacred story. The Outward Bound instructor Willie Unsolad wrote, "Why don't you stay in the wilderness?" He responds, because that isn't where it's at. It's back in the city. It's back in downtown St. Louis, back in Los Angeles. The final test is whether your experience of the sacred in nature enables you to cope more effectively with the problems of people. If it does not enable you to cope more effectively with the problems, Sometimes it doesn't. It sometimes sucks you right out of the wilderness, and you stay there the rest of your life. Then what happens by my scale of value? It's failed. You go to nature for an experience of the sacred to reestablish your connection with the core of things, where it's really at, in order to enable you to come back to the world of people and operate more effectively. Seek ye first the kingdom of nature, that the kingdom of people might be realized. Carl Jung called sacred stories personal mythologies. He explained that meaning making a great meaning makes a great many things endurable, perhaps everything. No science will ever replace myth. And a myth cannot be made out of any science, for it is not that God is a myth, but that myth is the revelation of divine life in man. How do we create and unearth our sacred stories and our personal mythologies? Honestly, it's not easy. There are stories that are so embedded in us that they operate subconsciously. I think the best metaphor for it is to describe that sacred stories are like the operating systems you find on the computers or smartphones or tablets you're watching the service on. They control how you go about your day, but unless there is a massive problem, for the most part, they're just in the background. They support the things you do and how you have fun and how you connect with others, but they're just in the background. It's like those two younger fish who are chatting to each other, minding their own business, and then an older fish swims by and says, "Morning, boys. How's the water?" And the older fish continues on when one of the younger fish turns to the other and says, "What the heck is water?" Now, some of this is covered in the field of narrative psychology, but I'm not trained in that field. Clergy are called to be companions and guides in this meaning-making journey. I suppose the uncovering of our sacred stories and our personal mythologies begins when we tell the story of our birth, when we talk about our parents, when we tell about our favorite teacher, when we tell about the person that we fell in love with and how we met, when we tell about how we decided to do what we do with our one wild and precious life. And of course, being an English major and the son of an English major, I'm biased. I think the key is to not just tell them, but to write them down. By writing down our stories, we can see the patterns. We can read between the lines. We can embellish. We can edit. Last summer, I took part in a course where I wrote my spiritual autobiography. I've told my life story many times, written many reasonably full accounts of my life, but it was powerful to sit down and read it out loud and trace the patterns. So why is all of this important? I think gaining a deeper sense of the stories that answer the why questions in our lives help in this meaning-making journey that most of us are on. It helps us realize how we interact with one another. For I know each one of us carries different stories and a different way of understanding the world. It's like that William Stafford poem. If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world. Following the wrong God home, we may miss our own star. Or as Barack Obama put it, at a Christmas party I danced with women old enough to be my mother. I talked sports over stale cheese puffs and meatballs with husbands who had been reluctantly dragged to the affair. I counseled sons and daughters on their college applications and played with grandchildren who sat on my knee. It was during such times when familiarity or wariness dissolved the lines between organizer and those who was supposed to be organizing that I learned about the work that I had chosen. I learned that the self-interest I was supposed to be looking at and looking for extended well beyond the immediacy of issues, that beneath the small talk and sketchy biographies and received opinions, people carried within them some of their central explanations of themselves, stories full of terror and wonder, studded with events that still haunted or inspired them, sacred stories. Perhaps as well, finding the shared narratives that each of us carry can also help us bridge the issues that polarize us. I can only imagine as we approach the 1-year anniversary of staying at home that we will carry with us the stories, maybe as scars, but at some point also proud flesh, as Jane Hirschfield recalls in her poem For What Binds Us, and see how the flesh grows back across a wound with great vehemence, more strong than that simple untested surface before. There's a name for it on horses. When it comes back darker and raised, proud flesh. But we don't have to be there yet. It can still be a wound. Understanding our sacred stories also can force us to be intentional about the choices in the stories we tell as we understand the impact that they have on our communities. We also can be critical about them as we discover the harmful impacts on us as well. The Nigerian author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie years ago spoke about the danger of the single story in a very popular TED Talk, where she describes how the stories she wrote as a child included characters who talked about snow and the weather and ginger beer, despite the fact that she grew up in Nigeria, had never seen snow nor drank ginger beer, and the weather was very consistent. Adichie's story speaks to the need for representation in the stories we tell. We also, of course, have to remember that we are community members. Brita Gill-Ostern, my professor of pastoral care, would often remind us that we are not individuals, we are individuals. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, we're caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one of us directly affects all. Our own individual searches for truth and meaning must be tempered with the understanding that sometimes our searches for truth and meaning can harm others. We must also imagine our communal search for truth and meaning. Yes, the quest for truth is our church's sacrament. It's an outward sign of an internal search. We do this work together. My friends, watching this on our separate screens, we are bound together by a faith which says your own individual life story matters. It is worth exploring our own personal mythologies. It's worth understanding how we became who we are. That is a search for truth and meaning, and a part of that search must also take place in a community. As we approach the 1-year anniversary of sheltering in place and physical distancing, may you be gentle with yourself, remembering that post-traumatic growth is far more common than post-traumatic stress. May it be so. May you be gentle with yourself. And amen. And now we will sing our closing hymn, We'll Build a Land.
Help the broken. We'll build a land where the captives go free, where the oil of gladness dissolves all mourning. Oh, we'll build a promised land that can be. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may them create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an everlasting
guess I need to step back just. Oh, this is tall person problems right here. Friends, our time together is coming to a close. But before you log off, I send you forth with these words of benediction. As you leave the sacred spaces that you have created in your homes, may you carry the light of love out into the world and use it to brighten your pathways. Or if you're staying at home, may you use it to brighten the corners of your home. May we hold the light always, and the light hold us always. Amen, and go in peace. And let us also, if you lit a candle at the beginning of the service, now is the time to blow it out. And let the smoke waft through the air for just a moment as we extinguish the flame here. I invite you to type into the chat, I carry the flame, or we carry the flame. And friends, we will be re-recording the sermon so that everyone can hear it uninterrupted. Hope to see you over at coffee hour.